We all love seeing incredible special effects on the big screen, but most of us don't know how much work goes into creating them. You might be shocked to see how some of your favorite scenes looked before they got a hearty dose of movie magic. We'll show you some amazing before and after scenes from some of your favorite films. We know that your life will be way more entertaining after subscribing to TheHUB, so be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Green Man. We're sure you've heard of the green screen before, but do you know how they work? To do something like put a dragon into a fantasy world like on Game of Thrones, you need a little help from some brightly colored fabric and a process called chroma key. Usually a vivid green is used, hence the name. This allows technicians to easily separate green screens from the surroundings and replace them with something else during the editing process. In Guardians of the Galaxy, everyone's favorite trash panda, Rocket, is really just a guy in a green suit being awkwardly petted by another man during filming. Even non-fantasy creatures, like the tiger from Life of Pi, can be reproduced using this method. These creatures look incredible on the big screen, but behind the scenes, it's strange to see actors lovingly cradle random green shapes or people in costumes. The more high fantasy the movie, the more chroma key technology is utilized behind the scenes. This makes films like Alice in Wonderland look almost as bizarre on set as it does on screen. Makeup. If you're a fan of YouTube makeup tutorials, you know that there are all sorts of amazing effects you can create with just some simple pigments. However, applying special effects makeup for a movie can take hours and hours. And every second of production is costing money. Some of the most extreme effects that you thought were done with clever costuming are nothing more than some camera magic. In The Dark Knight, Harvey Dent's transformation into Two-Face required visual effects instead of time spent in the makeup chair. It may be hard to believe, but Bill Nye didn't make a pact with Cthulhu in order to get his look in Pirates of the Caribbean movies, where he played Davy Jones. This also explains how Gollum in Lord of the Rings movie looks so precious. These films and many more utilize a process called motion capture. Those strange-looking facial sensors are used to record the actions of the human actors. Every movement and facial expression can be then mapped to a 3D model that performs all the same actions that the actor completed on set. Models. You might have assumed that the scenes featuring the Batmobile in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight were done in CGI, but they actually used a pint-sized model Batmobile. Remember that scene when Harvey Dent finds himself pursued by a garbage truck and Batman shows up to the rescue? Yep, all that crashing and driving was created with 1 to 3 miniatures of vehicles in a model of Lower Wacker Drive. The beginning scene of The Dark Knight Rises features Bane hijacking a plane, and although it's visually stunning, it's actually required very few special effects when compared to similar movies. They actually built a realistic model plane and rigged it to pivot on the ground. So when you see Bane and the others falling and struggling to walk on the plane, that's what it really was like for the actors during filming. Cameras were tilted to capture only open sky during some scenes to make it look like the plane was plummeting to the ground. Everyday scenery. We like to think that we can tell the difference between fantasy and reality when it comes to movies. But since computer-generated imagery, or CGI, is becoming more commonplace, it's getting harder. There are many scenes that have normal backgrounds that you would never guess were created in a studio. Simply strolling down the street in Wolf of Wall Street was accomplished in a studio, as was filming the background sky in Life of Pi. Actually, it's pretty surprising just how much of Wolf of Wall Street is CGI, considering that there's nothing especially fantastical that happens in it. We expect it in action movies, but don't stop to think that sometimes it's just cheaper and easier for the studio than filming scenes traditionally. Remember in Forrest Gump when Forrest met JFK? The CGI in that scene was clunky and obvious, but it's getting so good now that it's hard to tell when it's being used. Packing a stadium full of people extras is costly and time-consuming, so The Secret in Their Eyes just filmed in front of a green screen to make things a bit easier. Details. To make special effects seem even more realistic, they're often combined with real-life elements. This combination looks really strange in the before pictures, but can look amazing when the entire scene comes together in a film or TV show. If you love watching The Walking Dead, have you ever noticed that a lot of the background elements aren't real? Everything from abandoned cars on the road to crates of supplies were put in after filming. Daenerys does have an army of unsullied soldiers on set, it's just a lot smaller in real life than when you see the finished product. Packing a ton of old-fashioned cars into the actual street would be a logistical nightmare, and making a fake city would be no less of one. So, The Great Gatsby compromised by having some really antique cars and then using CGI to add a street full of them, and build up surrounding buildings and even a sky. Fired up. Having actual fire on set may be realistic, but it's also incredibly dangerous, as we're sure you can imagine. Instead, many of your favorite movie explosions were added using CGI. You've probably seen the Avengers cowering from a blast of flames, but the behind the scenes is much less intense and exciting. Mad Max Fury Road looks much less like an action-packed post-apocalyptic wasteland and more like a parking lot before all the fake flames and backgrounds are added. Even the old Fury Road itself has no small amount of effects applied to it in post-production. However, not all flames are CGI. On Game of Thrones, you know that the dragons aren't real, but the flames can be. Because sadly, we don't have the option of filming a real dragon, they just film a flamethrower and add the dragon in later. Superheroes. We love watching superheroes perform amazing feats in movies, but behind the scenes, all of those impressive acts just look a little weird. Like pretty much every scene filmed with the Hulk. Watching Chris Hemsworth as Thor trying to restrain Hulk is awesome, but watching him try to hold back what is clearly a human and what looks like a cheap punching dummy is unsettling. Mark Ruffalo has easily the least impressive superhero costume behind the scenes. Without CGI, he would just be a censor man, and that's not very exciting. We all know that heroes cause a lot of property damage, and it's much easier to CGI a scene than to have to rebuild an entire building or even a whole city. Watching Captain America leap onto the back of a train winding through the mountains is amazing. Watching him hang half an inch off the ground surrounded by green screens is decidedly less so. Seeing Tony Stark before a CGI costume is added looks really weird, especially since he still has on his helmet. It looks like Tony Stark had a few too many when he was putting on his costume. Action. Some of your favorite action sequences look quite silly before special effects are added. We know Superman doesn't really fly through the sky, but seeing him looking serious while dangling from strings is more funny than dramatic. How did they get his cape to flap just so? No, they don't use a fan, they just use some green screen ninjas to tug on his cape using strings. That job must look great on a resume. If you were worried for James Franco in The Great and Powerful Oz when his balloon ended up in a rushing river, you should know the closest he came to that was filming on a bright blue screen. Keanu Reeves can do many things, but he can't actually move like he does in The Matrix, which is pretty obvious when you look behind the scenes. When the characters in Game of Thrones look like they're risking their lives climbing up treacherous mountains, they're really not that far from the ground. Out of this world. CGI can make it look like we're in a whole other world, or that alien creatures have invaded our own. Watching Sandra Bullock in Gravity was enough to make anyone feel stressed out and have vertigo, but behind the scenes, things looked remarkably more relaxed, as she very clearly isn't floating around in space. The magical world of Oz looks remarkably less magical before the CGI environment is added. Hey, at least the yellow brick road is apparently a real thing. This goes double for Wonderland, and although everything looks fantastical on the big screen, Alice looks like she's wandering around in a room that's waiting for a coat of paint during filming. If you held your breath when Zachary Quinto took one giant leap in Star Trek Into Darkness, don't worry, your favorite alien really wasn't in harm's way. Perhaps surprisingly at this point, the ship's controls in Prometheus were very real, but understandably, the visual of the sky and the planet's surface were added in afterwards. Beach. Boats and water are two common things to be manipulated after filming. Ever since the first digital 3D water effect was shown in the 1989 movie The Abyss, technology has certainly come a long way. Naturally, adding tons of boats onto the harbor in the Godzilla movie was made a lot easier with CGI, but even the water itself isn't real. It's just actors on a set staring at the green screen. Arya in Game of Thrones is seen looking out over some water and rolling landscape, but it turns out that she's just really looking at a huge screen. Which movie do you think has the best special effects? What about the worst? Tell us what you think in the comments section. To learn more awesome behind the scenes facts, be sure to like our video and subscribe to The Hub for the latest. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.